For many years I was a big Pokemon fan, and I still do count myself as a big fan. But over the last few years I've really fallen off the wagon, pretty much stopping playing the games and consuming all content regarding Pokemon. The last games I played through was Pokemon Sword and Shield. I did play Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl for a little bit when it released, but I didn't even come close to finishing it. But that hiatus ended a little while ago when I actually started playing Pokemon again. It all started when I opened up Pokemon Go again just to see what it was like. It had been sitting on my phone for a few years now, and the urge to check it out again got the best of me. But I quickly found myself pulled back into the Pokemon world. Then the next thing I knew, I found myself having the original anime on in the background while I was studying for my exams. And now my exams are finished, and I have some time before I begin work. So as you can imagine, after finding out that they just released Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green on the Switch, I began playing Fire Red, and became instantly blown away with nostalgia by all of the old things in the Pokemon games, like the old structure of routes, the random encounter styles, the old Pokemon centers and all that sort of thing that were in the older games. But my point is, in returning to Pokemon, it gave me, and it still does give me, such a weird feeling of how much has changed in the last few years, especially since I began playing all those years ago. And by years I mean 10 years, as this summer it'll be 10 years since I started playing Pokemon games at all, or consuming any Pokemon content in general. So I first began playing Pokemon in 2016, and the global phenomenon at that time was of course Pokemon Go. And that was my introduction to Pokemon. I was only 11 years old at the time. I remember watching the videos of people playing the game as it wasn't available to me initially, and I definitely remember becoming instantly obsessed. The way people were role-playing as if they were real-life trainers. Looking back, I think on top of everything, they maybe saw a good window for content, but I think as well they were probably really nostalgic for themselves and their own childhood. I remember myself wanting to go on a real adventure like that. I think in this way, perhaps it wouldn't have happened to me without Pokemon Go, due to the adventure aspect that it did offer. And I think it's partly because of how lonely I felt at the time. I didn't have many friends, I was active in sports and stuff, but I felt like everyone was always closer to each other than I ever was. So I began on my own adventure instead. But living in an extremely rural area, I would walk up and down the street, to the extreme worry of my mum, between the two nearest Pokestops to my house, hoping to find some cool Pokemon. Whenever we would go into town for shopping or whatever, I would go out and hunt for Pokemon as the main character of my own show, heading out into the world, catching Pokemon, battling the gyms around, but admiring the cool Pokemon of others mainly. It was seeing the strong Pokemon of other people that had made me feel really inspired and driven to continue playing, so that I could one day maybe have Pokemon as cool as that myself. And I remember in that same summer I began watching the Pokemon anime and falling even more in love with Pokemon. I remember sitting on my bed with the sun coming through the window and seeing Ash in his bedroom at the very beginning of the original anime. And I remember binge watching the show over that summer and how close it made me feel to others, even if they weren't really. You know, like watching it I felt less alone. I felt like Ash, Brock, Misty and Pikachu were in some ways my own friends, as strange as that may sound. Heading out and socialising was something that was not really on the cards for me, and so it allowed me to not only fill the time I had, but to feel truly happy while doing it. Of course, I understand that filling the holes of one's life with something like Pokemon can be unhealthy, but I also feel that there are certain times in life when you just have to get through it in order to have better opportunities in terms of friends and other stuff in life. In my case, at that time, I was waiting until I could start secondary school here in Ireland. But what I mean to say is that Pokemon made me feel less lonely in my life. And since then, I've always kept Pokemon with me throughout the years. That same summer, I played Pokemon Omega Ruby, and I fell in love with that too. Having a Sceptile as my main Pokemon, and I felt such an amazing connection to my whole team too. One that I still also carry with me today. I'll never forget how much I felt immersed in the Hoenn region, seeing the open seas, and one memory from these games that really sticks out is seeing Primal Groudon in all his mightiness, and how the overworld was scorched from his power had me genuinely terrified as a young kid. These are what I remember as being some of the most intimate memories of my childhood in gaming, and in my childhood as a whole. But as the years have passed, I continue to play Pokemon, and it remained an emotional helper for me in very hard times. It was a cute but lived-in world with its own tragedies where I could really throw myself into whenever I needed somewhere to escape to during hard times of my life. Even outside of this, I began to shiny hunt and found this very fun and relaxing to do as a little hobby of mine. It let me visit the world of Pokemon, but not have to need a lot of time to immerse myself in the story. I could just play for half an hour if that was all I had, and then stop. But it didn't feel grindy to me like getting cool things in games can sometimes feel. It felt like I was just chilling and doing something relaxing, and I without a doubt spent hundreds of hours in many different games this way. But I think the real reason I'm talking about Pokemon today is because when I opened up Pokemon Go again and turned on the anime while studying, my growth as a person became evident within the 10 years that have passed while playing Pokemon. And of course during the time I wasn't playing too, since I haven't played before this in like 4 years. But I imagined the days where I would head out in my green Pokemon t-shirt with a little Charmander on it and walk along the roads trying to catch Pokemon. When I played Pokemon Omega Ruby for the first time, and how I was absolutely blown away, and how I used to watch the TV show, and I evaluated how far I've come where I'm now in college in a field I'm really in love with. How I'm a fully grown man now and not that boy anymore. But one thing that did kind of resonate with me was the feeling of being lonely. In returning to Pokemon, I've realised more than I would like to admit in some ways. Mainly in terms of being alone, that some areas of my life have not changed as much as I would have hoped they would. In truth, when I was younger, I would always push the day where I might get to be happy back. Like in school, I was always waiting for secondary school. In secondary school, I would wait for college to finally develop real human connection. But in college, I think I finally realised just how proactive one must be in trying to find real connections with people. And I'm sure in today's day and age, that is something that's very common in terms of like how people feel. It's something I personally know to be very common in myself, at least, and in some of the other people I know. And I'm thankful in a way to be reminded of an issue that has been what I would say is passively eating me in certain ways. Because now I can find ways to address it properly. I think if I continue to go forward another 10 years passively not making relationships and just being too scared, I'll really regret it. And it's not even so much I think as more as I know, So I think as a person, I'm going to begin taking steps to fix this area of my life. I know it may sound strange to have to be reminded by Pokemon that I feel lonely. But I mean, I just feel like I love people and the experiences that I can have with them. And I feel like I'm really missing out on that. But I think that's the point of this video, my very first video. I just wanted to share this epiphany that Pokemon gave me and share that I want to do better in this area of my life. And I really hope that maybe in some way this makes you feel, if anything, just a little less alone. I think for myself, at least right now, I will continue to play Pokemon Fire Red. Thank Pokemon for reminding me of who I was and who I am and the issues that have followed us both. And try to do as much as I can to build relationships that I can be proud of and happy with. But yeah, that's pretty much what I wanted to talk about today. And if you've made it this far, I hope you enjoy. And thank you.